Welcome to another episode of the So Frickin Healthy podcast, the show that gives you an apple a day and food for thought for those who want to have their cake and eat it too.
Hello everybody, I'm Kelly Brändli and I'm a scientific dating and relationship coach as well as a professional matchmaker. And I'm today's guest on the So Frickin Healthy podcast. In this episode, we talk about healthy relationships, emotional baggage, attachment styles, and our 5 love languages.
Hi Kelly, how you doing today?
Hi, I'm really great. Nice to be here, Danna and Megan. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Sure thing.
Nice. We've been wanting to have a relationships podcast for a while. I think you talked about sex specifically. I think Donna's got sex on the mind. So before we dive into relationships and stuff, let's learn a little bit more about you, Kelly. I read that you are in love with Canada and you're from Canada. So where in Canada are you from? And then how did you get over here to Switzerland?
Well, I'm originally from Vancouver, which always leads to the question, why would you leave beautiful Vancouver and come here? And I always say I came for love and I stayed for the love of it. Aww. I think it's absolutely beautiful here. There's a long story about the love that brought me here and how that ended in flames and tragedy and all kinds of stuff, which we can get into. But the outcome of that is I have the most amazing career now, and I get to help people go through all that and come out the other side now.
You also mentioned in our little pre-recording survey that you're an extensive traveler. So I'm curious, what's the most remote place that you've ever traveled to?
The most remote, well, I guess it's probably, I lived in Africa, in Tanzania for half a year, and then I traveled for another half year around. And so I've been to all kinds of remote places and villages in different parts of Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Burundi, Malawi. I used to spend my weekends on the island of Zanzibar, which is now touristy, but at that time there was nobody there. Wow. So I've experienced a lot of things, and I did it on my own as a backpacker.
So brave.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, like traveling within Europe and in North America, it is easy, right? Because it's kind of culturally ubiquitous from my point of view. It's the same. No, ubiquitous is the wrong word, but but anywhere besides these 2 places, I feel like I don't understand the culture enough to travel, even with other people. I was just telling Donna the other day, I would love to take my mom to the Holy Land, but it's always a little nerve-wracking. Of course, Donna, she's like, whatever, she just goes there and does it because she's familiar with it. So I think familiarity with locations, but I think, isn't that part of the allure? You just don't know what it is, so you got to go explore it for yourself.
Exactly. So, I mean, I was younger when I did that. When I think back now, I ask myself, what was I thinking? You do those things when you're invincible in your, early adulthood. I did learn Swahili, which helped me tremendously get out of a lot of binds and close calls and dangerous situations I shouldn't have been in. But yeah, I mean, that was the excitement of it, is going to a place that I didn't know anybody that had been to, and really just exploring what it was all about with my backpack and my hiking boots.
So I have to ask this. I know we're now on like a travel podcast apparently, but that's okay because I'm really curious. Would you let your kids go on that same trip?
Oh, hell no.
Got it.
No.
Got it.
I actually remember my mom, the day I left, I went to say goodbye to her and she was in such complete denial. She said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going off to Tanzania." And she says, "Don't be ridiculous." "No, you're not." And I said, "Yeah, I am." And I think that was the only way she managed to survive that period, was by completely denying that I was in another continent.
Wow, that's hilarious. My mom would somehow get me back with the power of her laser eyes. I don't know how she would do it, but she would do it. So as much as I want to hear all about your travels, because it sounds like really, really fascinating stories, I have to ask, because you did mention the love that brought you to Switzerland and how it ended up in flames. And I think that that's probably a very important story before we even, dig into what you actually do, to understand what actually brought you to do what you do.
Yeah. So I met my ex-husband while I was at university. And so there is a natural transition. Part of what brought us together was when he was growing up in Switzerland, his parents spent a lot of time in Africa. And so we actually connected over my travels in Africa, and that sort of brought us together. And then at one point, he lost his job and ended up through a connection of his father getting a job back in Switzerland. And so returned to Switzerland. I said, well, I'm coming with you. Having never heard of Switzerland really before and not knowing where it was, I said, yeah, take me with you. And so that's how I got to Switzerland in the first place. And then, go on 10 years. We moved many times in between. I lived in Austria and we came back. And then my marriage, shortly after my son was born, basically exploded, right? All this kind of stuff that we hadn't dealt with came up, and we ended up separating when my son was 2 years old. 3 weeks after my ex-husband moved out, my mother died.
Oh, wow.
And so I went through this, like I said, really traumatic crisis situation. I was so devastated by all this loss, having to travel back to Canada, plan a funeral with a 2-year-old. For those of us that have children, we know what that's like, all that kind of stuff. And so it sent me on this journey of how am I going to get through all of this? And at the time, I had my own company. I was doing staffing and recruiting in the pharmaceutical industry. And going through this process of how do I cope with this, and what does my future look like, and do I want a relationship again? And if yes, how am I ever going to figure that out? Led me to start down this path of coaching, learning all there was about the science of dating and relationships. I became a matchmaker, transferring my recruiting skills into the love space. And I found this new purpose in life, which is really to help other men and women who go through similar types of stories. Sometimes they're more traumatic than mine, sometimes they're less, but at the end of the day is how do people then move on from a divorce or a breakup to then find really the love of their life and create a healthy, committed, long-term relationship.
That's amazing. So I have to ask a follow-up question. It sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds to me like you became a matchmaker while not actually being in your then new relationship, or like the solid new relationship that you're in now.
You're very perceptive and correct. That is very true. So I wanted to help other people find the love that eluded me at that point. Yeah.
That's really interesting. How do you do that when you don't know how to, not that you don't know, but when you haven't gone through it yourself, I guess?
Very good question. And I'll say, there's a lot of people in the industry who are not in relationships. And, it's also, there's a saying, right? You don't go to a brain surgeon that operates on himself, right? You go to the guy that knows what he's doing. And oftentimes there's this thing, we can help other people a lot more than we can help ourselves. And that was really the process of learning that I went through. It wasn't until I got my own coach that I actually was able to sort it out for myself. And now I have the most amazing partner in the entire world. Sorry, ladies. It's just, absolutely fantastic. But it took me going through the process of what I now teach other people.
Yeah. Well, no, I have to correct you there. I have the best partner in the entire world.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's George. George is the best.
George is hands down the best human person on the face of the planet. But let's not fight. We're all pretty. Next.
Well, I think actually what we're doing is making the point is at the end of the day, it's about finding the one for us, right? And our ideal best partner is the one that fits to us. And, your best partner is not going to be the same for me and vice versa. And a lot of what people struggle with is thinking that the Hollywood ideal is the best partner for them.
Yeah.
Which is not true.
No, my husband is not a Hollywood ideal.
Same for mine.
But we fit in a very nice way. Oh, yeah. We were discussing, obviously, when we were, before we were recording, about how relationships fit into health, because, we're on the So Frickin Healthy podcast. And maybe, I don't know if you can, even because it's been a while, but reflect on when you were going through this time, both of losing your mom and your relationship with your husband. Can you remember what other physical kind of health things went along with being in that state of emotional distress? I mean, I can't imagine that the rest of your body was reacting very well to that. Or how did your body react? And kind of, we can tie that back into health.
So you're opening up a can of worms here, because I had extreme physical symptoms going through that. I mean, I was in depression. I'll be open. I ended up taking antidepressants to cope with that, which ended up in emergency heart surgery. Yeah. Wow. So 7 months after it all happened. So that's how much a really bad crisis situation out of a relationship can actually physically impact you. And on the flip side of that, we know from research that having a really happy, healthy relationship can positively impact your health. So just referencing, many people have heard of it, the Harvard study, this 80-year study where they followed initially men, and then it was expanded by other researchers to look at what creates happiness later in life and what creates good health later in life. And it all comes down to having this really stable, secure, healthy relationship. And that can actually prevent us from developing things like depression later in life. They even were able to show that it positively decreases the pain that we experience in our 70s and 80s. So if you're in a healthy relationship in your 40s and 50s, you experience less pain in your 70s and 80s. I mean, how amazing is that? Yeah. So the joy, happiness, and fulfillment we can experience from relationships can actually help us live longer, healthier lives.
Yeah, that's the blue zones as well. I'm not sure if that's tied with the Harvard study at all, but the blue zones, have you heard of this? Where people live to be the closest to 100 years old, like these areas around the world where people live really, really long lives. And they did also some studies staying with these people, learning about the culture, learning about the food, the exercise, all of their lifestyle and why certain groups of people live longer. And in every single one, it was relationships and community. So not necessarily a romantic relationship as what we're talking about today, but just relationships in general, groups of, I think there was a spot in Japan where there was groups of women who were together since 5 or 6 years old, and they have these little groups that they stay with until, of course, usually all their husbands die before them because women live longer, so you have to figure this stuff out when you're older, but they've gone through their entire life and they're still with this tiny little group of friends and having that relationship. And also the Church of Latter-day Saints, actually, which is a religious group. So it doesn't have to be just culturally, in a specific location, but it also religious groups that have community aspects to it and relationships. And I think that goes to exactly what you were just saying. They have, because of these relationships, they have lived longer. And that's also the blue zones, if you're ever interested in. I think they've done also a documentary, but I think it's also a book as well.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with the name, but I do know a lot about the studies. I know that they've done research in Japan about these women who move into these communal homes and they buy them in their 30s with the understanding that once our husbands pass on, then we'll move in there together, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
We should totally do that.
No, I'm already planning my Golden Girl group. That's what I'm calling it. It's my Golden Girl group, because that's what's going to happen at some point. I'm going to outlive my husband, and then I'm going to need my girls. and we're going to just hire someone to come in, cook for us so we can craft all day and binge watch whatever shows are on.
You just mentioned something that I just wanted to touch on, which is this idea of what is important in relationships. And it's actually the intimacy, right? And I always say intimacy stands for into me you see. And it comes down to vulnerability. Do we have people in our life where we feel safe to be vulnerable with, that we can share those deepest parts of ourselves? And, you know, a worry shared is a worry. What do they say? That saying, it's halved or something. And this is part of this relationship, is do you have that kind of intimate relationship in your life where you can share those burdens, that when you go through a crisis situation, you have somebody who actually not just supports you, but goes through it with you and wants you to come through it as if they are they are going through it themselves. And that's the real key. So having thousands of Facebook friends doesn't really count as relationships as much as having those 1, 2, 3 really deep, intimate connections.
Yeah. And that actually brings me to think about something that everyone who's listening right now can relate to, which was COVID, right? We all of a sudden, from being, you know, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, you had a certain degree of socializing. And if it's in the office, seeing people, or if it's going to networking events or going to a restaurant with friends, and that just stopped completely. And so some of us were lucky enough to have our families around who either kept us sane or drove us crazy, depending on who you ask and what day, right? But other people were alone. And I know that there is a little bit of a story for you, Kelly, with COVID. I'm not going to continue the question. I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah. So I met my partner, Renee, right before the lockdown. And so we actually had 3 dates before we went into lockdown. And I have asthma. And so I was really scared about having any kind of contact with the outside world in those early days. And so initially what I had said is, well, we'll just do this lockdown thing and, you know, it'll be over in a few weeks and then we'll see each other again. And so we had made an agreement that we wouldn't meet again. And so, you know, we went into lockdown, and the first week we chatted back and forth on WhatsApp. And then I got really creative, and I got these bands that vibrated so we could like touch each other without seeing each other. Like you could touch it and it would vibrate. And we would share t-shirts. Like I would put it in the post box and he would come get it and leave me one of his t-shirts so we could smell each other, like all this kind of stuff we did. And then we realized this was never going to work. And so we had a really early discussion of, well, why don't we just move in together? And so our 4th date was literally him coming with his son and his dog and moving into my house. And what was it then? 6 weeks of together 24/7. We figured it was make or break. Either we were going to come out the other side and say, thank you, I never want to see you again. Or if we've survived this, you know, we can survive anything. And luckily it was the latter. And our story, if anyone, you know, wants to read the details, is in Forbes. Forbes did a segment on COVID romances, and it was written up in there. So it was quite a COVID love story.
Wow.
Oh, cool. But that takes a leap of faith. But if I remember correctly, before you met Renee, you mentioned that you went on 96 dates before you found the one. Maybe you could elaborate on this, because it sounded to me like 96. First of all, does she keep a notebook? And if so, I love her, because that's data collection. Like, and was it really like all in for 96 dates? Or were you like, let's go on this date, test some theories, more scientific method? Like, where was your headspace with the dates?
It was a combination of both. So after my marriage ended, I met somebody very quickly, and we ended up in a 4-year on and off relationship. And after that relationship ended is when I started, you know, going on this journey of I need to date, I need to figure out what I want. And so with that question in mind, what do I want? Who am I? I started keeping a journal. And that's how it all started. It started with no sort of hidden agenda in it. And then as I started going on and I started seeing patterns and I started studying dating so that I could get better, then it became, I need to test some theories. And part of it, it's a funny story. I think it's funny. Being an ex-headhunter, I was used to doing interviews like 6, 7 a day. And so I dated in that way. And so I would arrange like 6, 7 dates on a Saturday, like in hour, like tucked. And I did it, for those of you in Switzerland, I did it at Bellevue, where there's 2 bars and they're connected by an underground. And so I would meet one guy in one bar, and at the end of the hour, I would like go through the underground and meet the next guy at the next bar. And I did that all day. And the people running the restaurant and the bar, they knew that I was doing this. They were always laughing. They were like, "Oh, your next date's here." And so
That's hilarious.
it
Oh
was
my God, I love that.
very much in the name of research. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure those
I bet
96 guys love knowing that they were part of a research.
Renee almost walked out of our first date because I refused to tell him what I did for a living. And so it was this big secret. And then on our first date, when I did tell him, he asked me the question, "Are you here for business or pleasure?" And he had his keys in his hand ready to run when I said, "It's bait and switch. I'm here to date you, to introduce you to somebody else." So it almost cost me the best
Wow.
relationship of my life.
What made him stay?
I think I was able to convince him just in the nick of time that it was personal. And I think I put my hand, I talk about physical touch in early dating. I put my hand on his arm at just the right moment. And I think that did it for him. And he said, "I need to explore this a bit further."
I could totally see you turning your 96 dates into some kind of a book. Please tell me you have some book in mind for this.
Well, that was my original thought, but do you know how many people have written that book? So I have another book in mind, which will, of course, include some of my most interesting and funny dating stories. I'd like to share much more of the outcome, the learnings, the wisdom that came from all those dates rather than just the entertainment factor.
96 guys, which sounds like you probably could do in a couple of weekends in the way that you did it.
It actually took me 18 months, but yeah.
Wow. Okay. So 18 months, which is a legitimately long time. Did you realize, because you were talking about the health impact that, you know, losing your husband and losing your mom in a very short amount of time affected on you, how did those 18 months go? Like, how did that affect on your health, your psyche, your just everything?
So the beginning was really tough. One of the things that I teach a lot about is attachment style, which is how do we relate to other people? And I had an attachment style that had a lot of anxiety built into it, which meant my whole self-worth was linked to what happened on these dates, right? So if I'd go on a date and the guy didn't like me, then I would be destroyed after that. And it would take me a while to then do the next date. And going through all the research and learning about attachment style, I realized why I suffered so much after bad dates. And what I then learned is, how do I shift that so I don't feel so attached to the outcome, but I still am invested? And in that process of going through my own healing of my attachment, I started to build up my own self-confidence and self-worth. And I got stronger and stronger. And I was able to then go on a date. And instead of saying, "Does he like me?" I was saying, "Do I even like him?" And that shifted. And that's where my health shifted dramatically, because I was no longer putting my own worth and value on what some random guy I was dating thought of me. And that was massive. And so that's the health piece that I teach the clients that I work with, to help them do just that, to really shift that, so that if they go on a date and it works out or it doesn't work out, they still feel great about themselves. And they know that that wasn't the right person for them, but he or she is out there, and they'll find them if they're willing to keep up with the process.
Do you find that more women have that kind of attachment to the outcome than men, or is that very individual? Because I feel, as you were talking about that back in the day when I was dating, that I very much had that same kind of thought process, that if something went wrong, it was my fault, or because of something I did. It didn't have that view of, did I like that person? And I think partly it's because I'm very easygoing. I'm not very particular. And I find some people who are particular are I think it's easier for them to say, oh, no, that's not my style of person, and maybe not attach themselves to the outcome as much. In your time now with working with people, how does that play out between no?
So no is the answer. We think that there's more women that feel that way simply because more women vocalize that, because as women, we tend to be much more comfortable in sharing those feelings. Like, I'm so sad after a date, where men, tend to just get on with it. But what we know from science, and what I know from working with clients, about 50% of the people are what we call securely attached, and the other 50% have insecurities. And, it happens as easily in men or women, but we've sort of stereotyped this. And again, I blame Hollywood for so much that's wrong in this world. And Hollywood has done a beautiful job of making women, that sort of needy, going after the man type thing, and the man being the strong, call him the island, you can't reach me, I'm emotionally unavailable. But that's not the reality. There's just as many men and women in each group. And that's one of the things, is for men who are brave enough to sort of step up and say, hey, this is what I've dealt with, to be able to help them, because this comes from our childhood. And we have no control over the family we're born into. And so if our parents weren't able to give us the love and support we needed when we needed it, we grow up with an insecure attachment. And that's just the reality. And so there's no difference between the genders to say only women grow up in a certain household and men don't, right? They each have the same chance of having that kind of childhood.
Yeah, but that makes sense when you say that women just verbalize it more. Men just keep it inside, or don't verbalize it as much to the world as women do. But that's good. I'm glad that you mentioned this, because I always had that impression, and I'm sure you're right. I'm sure that I had my rose-colored Hollywood glasses on. Yeah. So you primarily work with divorced people? Is that all you work with, or is that kind of where you've specialized? Is that where you want to stay? Or can our single people who have never been divorced give you a ring as well?
So I work with men and women who have been divorced, are children, I say adult children of divorce. I have clients who say, my parents should have been divorced. Does that count? Can I work with you? Absolutely, yes. And I also work with a lot of people who I say, were married to their careers and they need to get divorced first before they're going to find love. So it pretty much includes everybody in some way, shape, or form, because, that's sort of the world that we live in nowadays. And so whether they're long-term singles for whatever reason, or they've been through a divorce or a breakup of a relationship where they weren't married, I can certainly help them.
What or how is dating after you've been divorced different than before you've been divorced? Because Donna and I, neither one of us have been divorced, so we don't have any real world experience here. So maybe you could fill us in.
So, get us ready for when we finally divorce our horrible men.
That is not going to happen, because you both have the best men in the world.
That's true.
And so they should listen to this and make sure they stay that way. So what's the difference? So when we're young and we're dating, right, we've got our Hollywood glasses on, and, we're going out and we're looking for this Hollywood dream, right? We're naive to think that everything happens like in Hollywood. And so we don't have this realistic touch that you do later in life when you've had a relationship that you thought was the one, or you've been through a divorce. And so the big difference, and that was what I learned through my process, is that you need to work through those past relationships and let them go first. Because if you don't, you can't build a new relationship with a foundation of trust. And that's the big difference. So many people after, I'll say divorce, but I'm encompassing all of that, say, I can't trust anybody. I can't be intimate because I don't want them to see the parts I don't like about myself. And so without working through the past, they just keep bringing that into the new relationship. And that's what I did over and over again until I figured it out is, oh, but my ex did this. And the person says, but I'm not your ex. But you say, yeah, but I'm scared. Well, it's like, okay, that's your stuff to deal with, and that's the big difference that people miss. And so a lot of people after a breakup or divorce, they go out and look at, okay, how do I use dating apps and what should I wear and where should we go? And those are all great things, but they're so much later in the process. You first need to work on letting go. And then you got to get healthy, which is, I say you need to become the one before you find the one. Because to have a healthy relationship, you want to meet at eye level. You don't want somebody to save you from a life that you think is miserable. You want them to come in and you want to both complement each other's great lives. And so you first need to do that. And then once those two areas are covered, then you can talk about all the dating strategies and which app and what your profile looks like and all that stuff.
Right. It's so interesting that you bring this up because we often talk about this at home. My boys always want to hear about how we met and things like that. And my husband and I could have potentially had our lives cross a few years earlier. And every time we bring that up, and I think back to me at that age when I could have, should have, like met him, I go like, no. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for you. I had to go through all of these other relationships. And I was just telling Megan, those relationships lasted maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 months, but that was about it. But I had to go through it. I had to go through it in order to discover myself better, to understand myself better and what I'm actually looking for and who I actually am, let alone the fact that after I met my husband and until today, we both grew, together, but we both grew as humans as well. So it's really interesting to think about it in that way, where when you can't find love, when you're struggling, what is going on within yourself? What are you stuck on? And what are you kind of expecting, I guess, from yourself or from this mysterious partner that you haven't really kind of developed within yourself yet? I always say that everything happens for a reason. And so, all of those heartbreaks that I had, all of those random relationships that I had, whatever it is that I went through before actually meeting my husband, which I was lucky enough to meet pretty young, they had a reason. And the reason that I did not meet him until that moment was because I was plain not ready. I would have broken that relationship. Oh my God, I would have burnt it to the ground, if it was just like a year earlier even. So I love that you bring that up. And yeah, I think that was there's no question there.
No, but I think you've touched on a really important point, which is life, the world, the universe, whatever, God gives us the lessons we need to learn over and over until we learn them. And I remember after my third relationship ended, I was sitting in bed. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning. And I remember just crying, like tears just like pouring down my face, because I was like, why can't I figure this out? What's wrong with me? And so I turned to Google, as we do in this day and age. And I said, why am I single again? And unfortunately, which is exactly what I needed in that moment, but it was pretty blunt. It said, if you're single again, the problem's you. It's not the people out there. And that was for me that wake-up call that I needed to say, oh, maybe I should look at me. Instead of blaming all the men I was dating, saying, they're this or they're not this. What am I doing? What am I bringing to the table? And that for me was a real mind shift that changed. I said, okay, there's a lesson that I haven't been able to learn yet. And I need to learn that first before I'm going to be ready for that relationship.
Yeah, my relationships, I did not have any. I had a couple of long-term relationships in college, long-term meaning a year or less than 2, but still more than a couple months. But after that, I didn't really have any kind of really long relationships until I met my husband here in Switzerland. So maybe 10 years where there was kind of just on and off again relationships and just kind of living my life. But I also feel that even though that I haven't been divorced, I think that the act of growing up also helps with this, because if you get married at a young age before you actually know yourself, which I know old people say that and young people are like, I know myself, but you don't. Very few young people actually know themselves, and when they do, they're miles ahead of their counterparts. But I feel like having that time and also kind of accepting, and I don't want to say lowered expectations because it sounds like I don't expect a lot from life, but I literally said, I am happy with myself. Therefore, if I get married, that's great. If I have kids, fine. But it was never like I needed to get married. I never needed to have kids. And I feel like that makes a big distinction, because for some people who want to have a family, this kind of puts this pressure to find someone maybe before they're ready in order to start that family process. And I feel like that's just such a crime for humanity to not be able to have children whenever we want to biologically, to fit with our where we are with ourselves. You know what I mean? And I feel like from my point of view, it was such a blessing that I said, well, I'm not sure if I really ever want to have kids. So therefore, I don't necessarily need to ever get married to one person. And therefore, I'm happy by myself. And when I found him, great. He also didn't want to have kids. Perfect. Okay. You know what I mean? But I had a little bit of a leg up because I'd never had that pressure that some people have, and rightfully so. I mean, if you want a family, you have to take that stuff into consideration as a female. Just because we're living longer doesn't mean our eggs are lasting very much longer, you know?
Yeah.
Or
And men
patience.
too. I mean, I don't want to exclude men from this. There's men who really want to have children and they realize, I don't want to be a father in my 50s. I want to be a father in my 30s or my early 40s. And so they also feel the time pressure, which we as society don't recognize often. But I just want to say thank you for your explanation there, because you have perfectly described a secure person, somebody who knows that love is available and will always be there when you're ready for it. So if a relationship doesn't work, it doesn't destroy your self-worth and you think, oh, I'm not lovable and things. And so when you're secure, you can have relationships and they come and go and you're still great and you still have this wonderful life. And for the people who haven't developed that as secure attachment, that's where they struggle with relationships. And that's where I can really help people to work through that, is to help them become that secure, so that, you know, a relationship ending is always sad, but there's a difference between you grieve it, you move on with your life, versus people who spend years, sometimes decades, stuck because that relationship ended. I've worked with numerous clients who are 2-3 decades on from a divorce and they're still stuck in that grief and pain. They can't get themselves out.
Yeah. I took that emotional baggage quiz on your website today just to test it out, even though I've been with my husband for 11 years. But yes, do I every once in a while look up some of my exes on Facebook or LinkedIn? Of course. But primarily from the aspect of, I really hope they're doing well. Like, I felt like all of my relationships that I've had in the past have ended in a good way. I never had a relationship that ended horribly. And I feel like it's more of a touch into their life once a year. How's everything going? Oh, they have kids. Oh, look at this. Oh, you know, that's great. But I did your emotional baggage quiz and I think I came out with a medium with 20% emotional baggage. And I'm like, oh, maybe I think about them more than I thought I did. But
wait, so Kelly, explain to our viewers, our listeners, what that quiz is, what kind of questions are on there, and what's the point? Like, what is the result giving us?
So for people, generally people who do this quiz are single. So I don't have a lot of data from married people doing my quiz, but it relates to this: what do you need to let go of to be ready for a new relationship? And so for most people, this is really eye-opening, because it shows to them where they are emotionally, how much emotional baggage they're carrying with them that they'll bring into a new relationship. I think of it as the difference between, you know, check baggage and carry-on baggage at the airport. do you have this really small carry-on where you sort of whiz through and you do it? Or are you that sort of mother of 5 with, you know, a bag on each shoulder and 2 carry-ons and a child, and you're just like so weighted down that everyone just kind of gets out of the way? And so this baggage quiz is just sort of a really simple 10 questions to help people see how much baggage are you carrying, and is that something you should look at, you know, at the first stage of being ready for a new relationship. What do you need to let go of? And so this is often very eye-opening for people who go, oh, wait a second, I thought I was over that, and now I see maybe I'm not quite as far along as I thought I was.
That's super interesting. So what's the next step after taking that quiz?
So basically you'll get a result that shows where your baggage is. There's some tips of how you can overcome that, or certainly after that, if somebody's interested in having a call with me, we can jump on a call. I can help them interpret that and then also see what else may be standing in their way of finding love. We can look at their attachment style and how that could be impacting them.
Amazing. Hey, lovely listeners. Ever feel like you're stuck on the diet hamster wheel? It's time to hop off and start feeling amazing with a little help from yours truly. I'm Danna, your soon-to-be favorite functional medicine health coach, and I'm here to help you ditch those diet fads and finally thrive. Whether you're ready to say goodbye to those pesky sugar cravings, get your digestion dancing, or just love your body again, I've got your back. Working with me is like having a health coach who's part guru, part bestie, and all about keeping it real. I'll help you create a plan that's as unique as you are. No cookie cutter solutions here. Head over to Organilicious.ch and let's jumpstart your wellness journey together. It's time to glow, girl, because you deserve to shine. And if spelling Organilicious sounds tricky, don't worry. We've got the link in the show notes. Click it, love it, see you there.
I don't know if you guys watch RuPaul's Drag Race. Do you guys watch RuPaul's Drag Race?
No, sorry.
No.
Okay, because at the end of every single episode of whatever RuPaul's in, he always says, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else? I mean, it's just every single time, you know, like, yeah, that's right. You know, I mean, I feel like that's the basis of what you've been talking about, Kelly, is that if you can't really take the time and learn to love yourself and let that stuff go and really focus on who you are and what you need, right? What do you need out of a relationship, and what can you bring to a relationship, and not what somebody else is going to bring? It's that understanding yourself better. And that goes back to all the health coaching stuff, is in any aspect of your life, it's all about knowing yourself better. And as soon as you begin to just take the time, step back, grant yourself the time to learn what you want, who you are, what you like, what you don't like, how your body reacts to different situations, how your mind plays out things or doesn't play out things. I mean, all of this stuff is health related, and the what Danna and I have talked about before on the podcast. It's like, as soon as you know it, then you can do something about it, whether or not, you know. But the point is, if you don't know, if you don't take that time, then you're going to Tanzania without a fucking map, and you're never going to get there.
You're absolutely right. And people often say to me, oh, I hear all this self-love stuff, I don't know what this means. And I always say, well, if you don't already own it, you can't give it away. So you better figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that completely like echoes in my head that actually one of my clients told me was, not everyone is going to love you. You're not pizza. Right?
Oh, good point.
Right? And I'm like, and even pizza, not every single person loves. So it's such a good kind of catchphrase of just understanding, like, even if you're very ready and you're very, you know, you have that self-awareness for yourself and self-love, it doesn't mean that now everyone's going to fall to your feet, like, because not everyone is a perfect match for you. And oftentimes, and Kelly, I'm sure you have plenty to say about this, sometimes when someone is being an asshole, to put it lightly, right, at a date or in the office or whatever it is, it's usually a reflection of what they feel about themselves, or it's like, you know, it's just the bitterness that they have within them rather than what they feel towards you. And so taking that step back and going like, this had nothing to do with me. right? Even if it's someone bumping into you in the street and then like muttering something, you weren't a target. You were just in the way.
Absolutely.
You know, and it had nothing to do with you. So do you have clients who are in fact ready and are in fact in that state where they do have the self-love that they need in order to be open to a new relationship, and they come back to you crushed after they've had all these revelations with you and they went on a date and they come back crushed and like, this didn't work and this is terrible?
Yes, and that's their attachment style coming up again. And so we work through it, and then they get it all on a theoretical level. They're like, yeah, this has definitely changed. I've implemented this with my boss, with my mother. Everything's great. They go out on a date and they say, now it doesn't work. And it's a whole nother level. And so that's just part of the process of, we get the lesson over and over again until we really learn it. And attachment is something that you can always come back to and revisit. What do I believe about myself? Do I think I'm not good enough? And I go on a date and he or she confirms to me I'm not good enough. Well, that's it. And one of my key things that I talk about is the 3 C's of dating and relationships, which is compatibility, connection, and chemistry, but in that order. And so people often think it's the spark, right? Well, you can just F the spark, like really. It's compatibility. And compatibility, like Megan said, it's about a map. And when we go out dating, we've got our map of the world. And we want to find somebody who has a similar map to ours. Because when we live our life according to the same map, things become easy, right? When one person says go left, the other person looks at their map and goes, yeah, we go left here. But when we meet somebody, they may be a great person, but they've got a totally different map of the world, right? No matter how much we try to make those maps align, they're never going to align. And that's part of compatibility. And when people don't understand you're looking for compatibility first, they put their self-worth in the middle and say, I'm not good enough. But actually, your maps just don't align.
Yeah, and that's actually interesting because, you know, again, back to the Hollywood portrayal of things, is like, you know, there's always been a movie where somebody's like, oh, this is my list. This is what I want, right? It needs to be this and this and this and this. And on one hand, I think that person's probably halfway to the really good place because they've identified what they need. You know, what is their map? What does their life look like? And yeah, if I meet somebody and in a couple dates, I realize that doesn't line up, why would you continue going along this when it's just going to end in heartbreak? But yet somehow we stigmatize this person as not just letting romance happen, and they're too controlling and stuff. And it's like, really? No, I mean, actually, they're probably right on. But we're watching How I Met Your Mother again, and we just passed the episode where he goes to a matchmaker and she can't find a match for him. And she's like gonna throw her whole business out the window because there's science behind this. And there's this one person, you don't have any matches. It was hilarious. But in the end, he's like, no, I have faith that I will find someone. But the science and understanding the mechanisms behind it, like I've never heard of this kind of attachment thing before. And it makes so much sense when you say it out loud. But again, this is stuff we don't teach our kids. We don't teach young people that this is the way, you know, because think about it, when you're dating in your teenage and early 20s, I mean, it's really damaging during that time period when you have that huge, they don't have any representation. They didn't see, you know.
Well, at that age, you're looking for the prom date. And that's a really dangerous place to be, right? You want to date the hottest person in school to go to the prom, right? Like, you're not looking, is this person marriage material? Will they, you know, be a good partner? Will they be a good mother or father? And what are our core values? And do we share values? And that's not what you're looking for at that age. But later in life, that becomes so much more important to how you create that list. It's not about how tall they are, you know, what kind of job they have, what kind of car. It's, do we share the same value when it comes to having children? So when we're young, our list is so much about how did they look, how much status do they have at school, and what job do they have, or what are they going to get? We date a lot on potential versus reality. And later in life, these things become much more important to us. Our values, that's who we are. And so we want to have somebody who shares those values, who has the same map of Do we want to have children? Is that important to us? How will we raise our children? What do we do with our money? Where do we invest it? Do we invest in a house and cars, or do we invest in education or experiences and travel? So those are the kind of values that should be on your list, rather than, height and weight and how long their hair is and what color it is and all those things, because those things don't matter in relationships at the end of the day. It's the values that science shows is what creates healthy long-term relationships.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Can we talk a little bit about, and I'm wondering if that's part of what you do also, is talking about the love languages?
I do, very much so. Yes. So what would you like to talk about in terms of love languages?
I mean, what I realized for myself when I discovered the love languages, which was probably a good decade ago, I think, it was a huge eye opener for me, because I'm very needy. Apparently, I need all of them. No, I don't need all of them, but like, I'm very like, I need my husband. Like, I tell my family I love them probably a trillion times a day. It's like disgusting. I will grab everyone for a hug, like all the time. Whenever I pass someone, I like touch them or I hug them or touch their hair. Like, I'm very much a physical person, but I'm also like, do the freaking dishes to show me that you love me. Don't just tell me that you love me, right? So I'm driving them crazy, basically. But what I notice about other couples and like clients who come up to me and they start talking about their partner and how this was annoying or that was annoying, and I bring it up, I think that it's a huge part of understanding the relationship that you could be in potentially, but also the relationship that you are in, and how you can understand each other better, because it could be that the compatibility is there, but the communication, I guess, is kind of blurred, because when your partner is doing the dishes because that's their way of showing you love, but you don't see it as that, and you're sitting there expecting them to bring flowers or I don't know what, right? Then there is this kind of interruption in communication that is not verbal.
I could talk about this for hours. I love the love languages, and it sounds like you're very fluent in many languages, which is super. And that's probably part of the success of your marriage and your family, is that you can speak other people's main love language, and however they're communicating their main love language, you can receive. Where the love languages really help people is if you've got one dominant love language and that's the only way you can actually receive love, you might miss the other things. So if you're a person who needs to have that constant, I love you, I love you, I love you, and your partner is the person who shows love through acts of service, and they don't say I love you all the time, but they vacuum the floor, they do the dishes, they wash your car, they put gas in your tank, they're telling you all the time how much they love you, but you can't receive it. And that's one of the challenges. There's a joke about a couple who have been together for 50 years, and they go to the divorce court to get a divorce, and the judge says, well, what's the reason for the divorce? And the woman says, he never tells me that he loves me. And he says to her, I told you the day we got married I loved you. If it had changed, you would have been the first to know. And it was that sort of, it confirms, right? She needed to hear it. He didn't think he needed to say it, but he probably did so many other things that she never realized were his expression of love.
We use love language all the time in our household. First of all, my husband loves taking any kind of quizzes. So whenever there's a quiz, I like, here, take this quiz, see what you are. We just did our chronotypes. We're both bears, which is good because we're very compatible in terms of daily routines. So we did the love languages years ago, and it had a very good effect on our relationship. And most of the time now, at least once a week, we talk about love languages. And most of it at the time is me sitting on the couch and going, will you go get me a glass of water, please? My love language, acts of service. And it's like, yep, okay, yeah. And then every once in a while he'll want to cuddle, and I'm just like, I don't want to cuddle. He's like, but I need to cuddle. And to be able to reference the love languages is a really good kind of I don't want to use the word crutch, but it's like a platform or someplace where we can both have the common language of what do we need right now. And I'm not a big presents person, but and my love language, gifts were high on my list. And I think when I tried to explain to my husband, like, no, I don't need you to bring me flowers every day. I think, and the way I translated this to for my own self was, by you buying a gift meant that you were thinking about me at some point in the day today, or you have taken the time and energy to do that. And therefore that is the love, not the actual thing that I'm getting from it, right? It's really you have thought about me at some other point in time, or you have arranged something in a way that, and when I explained it to him this way, he's like, oh, okay, well, that makes more sense than I just need to have, chocolates and flowers every day as a gift love language. But definitely, I love love languages. I talk about them constantly with like couples, and it's even without couples, like you said, it's in my parents all the time growing up, because my dad was definitely an acts of service person, and he would do everything around the outside of the house. Everything was pristine, and but quality time was not. Could see that kind of.
Megan, your internet, I think, is also
it came unstable. It says unstable. Yeah. So this kind of dichotomy with my parents' relationship, I could see very clearly. And again, after I learned about love languages, then it was like, oh, that's the reason why they had this misunderstanding or the rub. And that's a lot of times you can see that that's the rub in people's relationships, is that they haven't understood their love language yet. And they just don't think the other person is showing them the love in the way that they need it.
Yeah. And I love the way you say to use the language to give this understanding, because that's so important. And one of the principles I teach is set the other person up for success, right? Don't try and catch your partner like in a trap and make them fail, but help them succeed. And using the love language is a great way to do that. When you have that common language, to say, it means a lot to me to get a gift, but it could be a Post-it note, with I'm thinking of you in a heart. That could be the gift that says, hey, he or she thought of me today. It doesn't need to be something super expensive. And if you love flowers, tell your partner what kind of flowers, so that when they give them to you, you have excitement about them, rather than going, yeah, but those aren't the ones I really wanted. Set them up for success. And by using the love languages and communicating, what you need when you need it, you do that for your partner. And that's a huge gift.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you. And that's a wrap on our long lost episode from 2022. Life has a funny way of throwing us curveballs. And since both Danna and I have ADHD, we've said it before, we'll say it again, finishing projects can sometimes feel like trying to herd cats on roller skates, but hey, better late than never, right? In the time since we recorded this episode with Kelly, her life has been anything but boring. Her partner Renee has joined the ADHD club. Woo! And together they are navigating the wild ride of life that is having a partner with ADHD. And they're doing it with even more humor, patience, and a lot of reminders on their phones. Now, Kelly's channeling all that experience into something really, truly special. She has a new venture called Synapse, where she focuses on ADHD and relationship coaching. Sign me up. We're beyond excited to have her back on the podcast soon to dive into this new chapter. So do stay tuned, subscribe, and because if there's one thing we know, that Kelly, there's always more to her story, and she's an amazing, amazing guest. If you're still hanging around, here's some stuff we couldn't fit in, but we thought it was funny. Outtakes! I could totally be a motorcycle person, because I I was in the moped army in the US. We did, yes, I had a Puch, which is actually a German model. And yeah, no, we had this totally cool little clique of people who had mopeds, and we would ride our mopeds around and sound like a big, like, swarm of mosquitoes going by.
Oh, I would have killed
Yeah.
you. Oh, I would have probably punctured your wheels every single night.